Can I get you something to drink, Tall?
Thrill me.
Phone for ya.
Thrill me.
You want a bite to eat, pal?
Thrill me.
A BrassReel Halloween?
Thrill me. Oh yeah, what's up guys? Bobo here from BrassReel Brothers. Thanks for coming back for some more hot fresh popcorn during a BrassReel Halloween! And this week, starting off from Monster Monday, we got some juicy nostalgia for you. Night of the Creeps. So this movie's directed by Fred Dekker, who also did Monster Squad. That's one I got coming up next week. Those are the ones he's really famous for. He also did RoboCop 3. I mean, that movie's fun to watch, but come on. And he's done other things, writing stuff in Hollywood. He's responsible for a lot of other stuff behind the scenes. But Monster Squad and Night of the Creeps are his two essential films, especially Night of the Creeps. Night of the Creeps is completely his baby. But man, do I love this movie. It's starring Jason Lively as Chris, Jill Whitlock as Cynthia Cronenberg, which there's your first homage right there, Steve Marshall as Chris's buddy, JC, and of course, the sleeper king of all horror films, Tom Atkins. Oh, that dude is so awesome. He's kind of like what Roger Moore was for James Bond. It's like this little bit of an older guy, but he's still cool as hell and he's getting all the chicks and he's got one-liners out the ass. But I love Tom Atkins. I love him in Halloween 3. I love him in the My Bloody Valentine remake or the 3D one, whatever you want to call it, remake, sequel. He's great in The Fog, Creepshow, Maniac Cop. Anyways, I love Tom Atkins, always have. I think any true horror fan loves Tom Atkins. In fact, one of my favorite YouTubers that I like to watch, who's also a huge inspiration for me, Drum Dums. He's always wearing this t-shirt that says Tom Atkins rules. Man, I want that t-shirt so bad. Shout out to you, Drum Dums, if you're watching this. But man, is this movie a huge love letter to horror films, an homage to everything in horror. Going from starting off in the 50s, where it's all in black and white, this sort of axe murder on the loose thing going, while coinciding with some alien foreign material that's been launched from a spaceship, because you also see these three aliens fighting on this spaceship, and one of them is being chased by these other two, and he launches something out and it lands on the planet, and then that turns everybody into zombies, but then it's all tied into this axe murder situation, and there's some flashback. It's awesome. It's a heyday for any horror fan. I highly recommend this movie. It really does like cover all the genres, the sort of like 1950s sci-fi thing, also the sort of axe murder urban legend thing, but then it's fully 80s. I mean, the look aesthetically in this film will bring you right back to the 80s. If you were a kid in the 80s, I'm telling you, you will be transported right back in time. And you can also tell that Fred Dekker directing this movie had a blast doing it. You could tell he truly loved this story. He loved directing this movie. This was right up his alley. This is why he was directing films, to do this movie. I don't know that for a fact. I never heard him say that, but just from watching it, I feel like that. So the two lead guys, Chris and JC, played by Steve Marshall and Jason Lively, they're complete nerds, but they're super likable. You know, you're on their side, but they are nerds. And they're constantly up against this guy, Brad. They should have named him Chad. Chad. He's played by a guy named Alan Kaser, or Kasar. He's that stereotypical douchebag you have in a lot of movies and slashers. And that's another thing, this movie's a slasher too, because there is a body count in this movie. But just the way those two lead guys are acting the entire time, every 80s movie at that time was like that, and they were just following the mold. They just play off of each other the whole time. And the main lead guy, he's just a goody two-shoes, and he's always just trying to get this girl. He's like super smitten over this girl, who her name is named Cynthia Cronenberg, which I'll go ahead and talk about that. That's cool. Like, two of the little things right off you see or even hear in this movie is one, at the beginning they're at Corman University, Roger Corman, and then two, you hear them say the girl's name. Her name is Cynthia Cronenberg. David Cronenberg. So the whole thing with these guys is they're trying to get into this frat, and they get challenged by the leaders of the frat, Brad, to go steal this corpse out of this lab that just happens to be right down the street from this university and frat houses and sorority houses. And when they get in there, they realize something's up. Also, that's another thing. The scientist in this is played by that guy named David Paymer, who was in everything from the 80s and 90s. But they run past him and break into this lab, and they have to steal this corpse that they see floating in all this water. And right there, if you've ever seen Return of the Living Dead, this movie and that movie are very similar in tone. They're kooky, they're goofy, they're funny, but they're also gruesome at moments. They're not really scary at all. They're just fun, but they are horror films. But I'm telling you, watch Return of the Living Dead and this movie and you'll see, oh yeah, there's a lot of similarities, especially in that scene where they're trying to steal that dead body. And it scares the hell out of them immediately. There's cool practical gore effects and scenes in this, as well as there's cheesy and fun ones, like the way that they're spitting these slugs in these people's mouths to turn them into zombies. So that's essentially what happens. That thing the alien was shooting down from his spaceship at the beginning turned the guy in the black and white scene from the beginning into a zombie. All kinds of other stuff unfolds throughout the movie. I'm not going to spoil any of that for you, but it just has a lot of fun, cheesy effects that are still awesome. As soon as Tom Atkins comes into the picture, he's great because he's always saying "thrill me." When he answers the phone, when he's walking up on the detective scene, when he's just talking to anybody for any reason at all, he always just responds with "thrill me."
Thrill me. Thrill me. Thrill me. Thrill me.
Thrill me.
It's way over the top and I love it. And he has something to do with the flashback and that black and white scene you see at the beginning. All this stuff unfolds. For a moment, there's an exposition scene with him explaining it all, and it actually gets a little serious just for a moment. It breaks character from that fun, goofy horror film just for a second, but then it jumps right back in. You gotta love when Tom Atkins goes down to the precinct and asks for a flamethrower to check out.
Flamethrower. Flamethrower. Yeah.
I just think it's great how they have a flamethrower down there. I mean, maybe they do, who knows? And of course something happens where everybody starts getting infected, because it's a pretty smart idea to have these like slugs infecting everybody. Basically, the zombie, alien, whatever they are, they're all walking around and their heads open and split apart, and like all these just slugs fall out and then go and infest other people. So it's actually kind of a clever way of infecting an entire town with zombies. So the whole town's infected now, or starting to get infected, including some of the animals. I love all the animal zombie scenes. Those are fantastic. Then there's a zombie date scene with his girls holding hands and talking. That's classic. The axe murderer from the beginning comes back as a zombie and turns around and smiles. Again, movie gold. After they figure out how to kill all the creatures and everything, and again, super 80s the whole way through. The music, the cinematography's great, but it's all 80s. The sets, the way the house look, and for some reason they just felt a huge need to throw the Miller timeline in there.
It's Miller time.
And we get to see how much of a badass Tom Atkins is finally when he loses it and just goes crazy with the gun shootout scene. Oh, and one more thing I totally forgot to mention. I love it that the janitors talking to that Asian guy keeps on referring to them screaming like banshees and laughing.
Screaming like banshees.
I don't know why that gets me. That's just hilarious to me. So this whole movie now, you've been focused, since they've been showing you all these zombies walking around and the slugs and the zombie animals and just all this crazy stuff happening. You've been focused on that part of the film that you forgot about the alien part of it. And then they tie that all up at the very end where there's cemetery they're showing and you can see this alien ship take off. Pretty cool. They leave it in for a sequel, like a cliffhanger. They never did anything with that though. All in all, this movie, I think it's a winner. I think it's a lot of fun, especially around the Halloween time. It's got great comedy. The gore and special effects are awesome in it, while sometimes being cheesy at the same time, but I love it. It all works. Like when they're in the bottom at the basement at the very end and all the slugs are coming together. But still, it works for the movie, and I think it's very self-aware. I think this movie knows what it's trying to do, and it was very successful at doing that. I mean, the cinematography's all there. It's a pretty clever story. It's trying to be silly. I mean, it's just a lot of fun for a horror movie. Oh yeah, and there's a full-on TAA shower scene too, just to make it an extra horror film. And also the Blu-ray is really good too. It's got some amazing special features, behind-the-scene documentaries and stuff on here. While the cover's not the original one, it's a redone one. I'd rather the original, but it's still worth the buy. So Night of the Creeps. Oh yeah, nostalgic 80s horror Halloween popcorn. Well guys, that'll do it for this episode of Hot Fresh Popcorn in week 2 of BrassReel Halloween. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for the cult classic Army of Darkness, because this thing's still just now getting started. Also look for BrassReel Brothers on Facebook. Look for Bobby Williams on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, BrassReel Bobby at BrassReel. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button so you can help us get famous. And also, life gives you lemons, make some hot, bloody popping corn.
Thrill me.